She almost didn't take the envelope. It was sitting on her kitchen table when she woke up that morning. Plain white. No stamp. No return address. Just her name written in ink so dark it looked like it had been pressed into the paper with purpose. Maya. Just that. One word. Her name. She didn't know how it got there. She lived alone. She had locked the door the night before. She was sure of it. But there it was. And inside, a single card. Black. Glossy. With 4 words printed in gold. I have a proposal. And a number. Maya stood there in her kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, holding that card like it might burn her. Her coffee went cold. She forgot to breathe for a moment. She didn't call the number that day, but she called it the next day. And that phone call changed everything. Her name was Maya Callahan, 28 years old. Brown eyes, dark hair. She never had time to style properly anymore. The kind of woman who was pretty without knowing it. Or maybe she used to know it, back before the last 2 years hollowed her out a little. She lived in a small apartment in the city. The kind of apartment was fine when she first moved in. Young, excited, and full of plans. But now it felt too quiet. The walls felt close. The windows faced a brick building, so the sunlight came through for only about an hour each afternoon, and she had learned to stand in that one patch of golden light like a plant desperate to survive. She worked at a small bookstore. Callahan and Company. Her grandfather had started it. Her mother had run it after him. And now it was hers, if you could call it that. Because the truth was, the bookstore was dying. Slowly. Quietly. The way things you love tend to die when you're not paying attention. The rent had gone up twice in 3 years. Foot traffic was down. People buy online now. The big chain 2 blocks over had a coffee shop inside. Maya had a hot plate and a kettle. No match. She owed 4 months of back rent on the building. The landlord, a cold man named Hargrove, had left 2 voicemails that week. She hadn't returned either. She also owed money on a small business loan her mother had taken out before she died. Cancer. 18 months ago. Fast and devastating, and the kind of loss that rewires you permanently. Maya had been running on empty ever since. Not dramatic about it. Not theatrical. She just got up every morning, opened the store, arranged the books, made the tea, sat at the counter, and waited for customers who sometimes came and sometimes didn't. She read when it was slow. She cried occasionally in the back room where the biographies were kept, then washed her face and came back out. She had one friend who called regularly, her college roommate, Diane, and one elderly customer named Mr. Fortis who came in every Tuesday for a new mystery novel and always said, "You're too pretty to look so tired, girl," which drove her crazy and also made her feel, in the smallest way, seen. That was her life. Quiet, struggling, holding on. And then someone put an envelope on her kitchen table. She told herself she wouldn't call. The first day, she left the card on the counter, walked past it, made herself busy with inventory sheets and a small delivery of used paperbacks. The second day, she picked it up, turned it over, put it down again. The third day, she called. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the 4 voicemails from Hargrove. Maybe it was the bank letter that had arrived, the one she didn't have to open to know what it said. Maybe it was just that she was tired of being afraid, and something about that card, the boldness of it, the nerve, made her tired of being cautious too. She dialed the number. It rang once. Just once. Then a man's voice. Low. Controlled. Not warm, exactly, but not cold either. The voice of someone who chose every word with great care. Miss Callahan. Not a question. He already knew it was her. She felt a chill she couldn't explain. How do you know my name? I know a great deal about you. I apologize for the unusual delivery. I wanted to make sure you received this personally. You broke into my apartment. A brief pause. A member of my staff did, yes. You have my word. It won't happen again. I wanted your attention before I had your trust. She should have hung up. Any reasonable person would have. She didn't hang up. What kind of proposal? The kind that solves your problems. All of them. In exchange for something very specific. Her heart was beating fast. She gripped the phone. What do you want? 3 months of your time, Miss Callahan. That's all. I need a companion. Someone intelligent, composed, and capable of discretion. Not a romantic partner. A presence. A professional arrangement. In exchange, I will pay off every debt tied to your bookstore, clear your personal loan, and provide a monthly stipend that would allow you to keep your doors open for the foreseeable future. Silence. She was standing behind the counter of the bookstore. Two customers browsed the shelves, oblivious. Mr. Fortis was reading the back of a novel near the window. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Elias Voss." She didn't recognize it. Not then. "Why me?" "Because I did my research, and you're exactly what I need. Someone real. Someone who won't be impressed by the wrong things." She almost laughed. Almost. That's a strange reason. I'm a strange man. She stood there a long moment. Outside, a bus went by. The sun was already past her window. The good hour of light was gone. "I'd need to meet you," she said. "In person. Before I agree to anything." "Of course.
Tomorrow.
Noon. I'll send a car." And that was the moment. The moment she stepped off the edge of her ordinary life.
She didn't know it yet.
But she would. The car arrived at 11:58. Black.
Long.
The kind that doesn't have a visible driver until someone opens the door for you. A man in a dark coat, young, expressionless, held the door and said nothing. No greeting. No explanation. Just an open door and a quiet expectation that she would get in. Maya had told Diane where she was going, written down the license plate, left it on her counter.
She was smart about it.
She wasn't reckless. But she got in the car. They drove for 40 minutes. Out of her neighborhood, through downtown, past the financial district, and then up into the hills above the city, where the roads got quieter, and the buildings got farther apart, and the trees pressed in close on either side like they were keeping secrets. The car stopped at a gate.
Iron. Tall.
With a small intercom and a camera that pivoted toward her like an eye. The gate opened without anyone speaking. They continued up a long driveway lined with dark hedges, perfectly trimmed, until a house came into view.
It wasn't a house, really. It was a statement.
Stone and glass. 3 stories. Set back from the drive by a wide courtyard where a fountain stood silent. The water wasn't running. There was something about that detail. A fountain that wasn't flowing, like something waiting to be turned on. A different staff member, a woman this time, sharp-eyed and professionally blank, met her at the door and led her through a foyer that smelled of paper and expensive wood and something else. Older, like leather and time. She was brought to a room that looked like a study crossed with a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves on 2 walls. A fireplace that wasn't lit. A wide desk near the window. And at the window, his back to her, a man looking out at the courtyard below. He didn't turn immediately. This was intentional, Maya realized. He was letting her look at him first, letting her form an impression.
He was tall.
Broad shoulders. Dark hair, slightly longer than corporate, like he'd gone a month too long without a haircut and found he preferred it. A dark suit that cost more than her monthly rent. She could tell by the way it sat on him.
No tie.
Top button undone. When he finally turned, she understood a few things at once. He was younger than his voice suggested. Mid-30s, maybe. But his eyes were older. Dark gray.
Still.
The eyes of a man who had already won every argument he'd ever had and was now just waiting to see if you were worth having. He was, objectively, devastating to look at. She filed this information away carefully and tried not to show it. "Miss Callahan." He crossed the room toward her. Unhurried. "Thank you for coming." "You sent a car." The corner of his mouth lifted.
Just barely.
"So I did." He gestured to the chairs by the window. 2 of them, a small table between them. Tea is already laid out. She noted the detail, chamomile, her preferred, and wondered how he knew that too. They sat. For a moment, neither spoke. She looked at him steadily. "Tell me what you actually want." Something shifted in his eyes. Appreciation, she thought. Like she had passed the first test without knowing there was one. "I have obligations," he said. "Business and personal. Over the next 3 months, I'll be attending several events. Dinners, a corporate retreat, a charity gala, and 2 family gatherings, where it would be significantly easier if I arrived with someone. Not a partner in any real sense. A companion. Someone who can hold a conversation, doesn't fidget, and won't be overwhelmed by the environment. Why not someone you actually know? Because people I know have agendas. They read into things. They tell stories afterward. He poured the tea himself. Set hers in front of her. You don't know my world. You have no stake in it. That makes you safe. Maya picked up the cup. Or it makes me naive. I don't think you're naive. He said it flatly. I think you're cornered and careful, which is a very different thing. She looked at him. You researched me. Thoroughly. That should bother me. Does it? She considered. A little. But I'm still here. She set the cup down. Tell me about the something specific you mentioned on the phone. He met her eyes. Discretion. Complete and absolute. What you see, what you hear, what you learn in the course of these 3 months, none of it leaves your possession. No social media. No conversations with friends. No diaries, no notes, no recordings. You see my world, and when the 3 months end, you take none of it with you. That's a lot to ask. Which is why I'm paying considerably for it. He named a number then. Maya kept her face still. She had practiced staying still. But inside, something shifted like tectonic plates. It was more than enough. More than she'd made in 2 years. More than the store owed in total. And after, she asked, when the 3 months are up, you go back to your life. The store is saved. The debts are cleared. We never see each other again unless you choose otherwise. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the fountain still wasn't running. Why isn't the fountain on? She asked. He blinked. It was the first time she'd caught him off guard. Just slightly. It hasn't been turned on since my mother died, he said. 2 years ago. A beat of silence. I'm sorry, she said.
And meant it.
He looked at her a moment longer than he probably intended to. So am I. She said yes that afternoon. She told herself it was the money. It was the store. It was practical, controlled, and temporary. She signed a contract, a real one, drafted by lawyers, with clauses and protections, and a clear end date. She told herself she was in control. She was not entirely right about that. The first event was a dinner 3 days later. 40 people in a private room at a restaurant that didn't list its prices. Maya wore the dress that had arrived in a box at her apartment that morning. Black. Elegant, not revealing. Exactly right. She had wondered briefly who had chosen it. It fit perfectly. Elias arrived at her apartment to collect her. He looked at her for a moment when she opened the door. Said nothing about the dress. Just, you'll do well tonight. Not you look beautiful. Not you look nice. You'll do well. She was somehow more unsettled by that. At the dinner, she played the role quietly. Attentive.
Composed.
She spoke when spoken to, asked intelligent questions, didn't drink too much, and didn't fidget. She watched Elias across the table negotiate a conversation with 3 different people simultaneously, without appearing to try.
He was extraordinary at it.
Presence without performance. Authority without aggression. At one point, a man leaned close to her, silver-haired, oleaginous smile, the kind of man who thought attention was a gift, and said, "And how long have you and Elias been together?" Before she could answer, Elias's voice came from just behind her. "Long enough for me to know she doesn't like being cornered." The man laughed, but moved away. Maya turned. Elias was standing just a step behind her chair, close enough that she could feel warmth. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I know." He moved away again.
Just like that.
And she stood there in that expensive room with 40 important people and felt something she couldn't name yet. Like a door had opened just a crack. Just enough to see light. She didn't say anything about it, but she remembered it. The second week, they attended a corporate dinner. A different crowd, sharper, more competitive. Maya noticed people watching Elias the way people watch the weather.
Cautiously.
Trying to read which way he'd go. Afterward, as the car drove them back through the city, the silence between them was comfortable for the first time. "You handled Gerald Marsh well," Elias said. "The one who tried to impress me with his yacht?" "Yes." I've read a lot of novels about men like him. I recognize the type. He glanced at her. Which type? The kind who talks about what he has instead of who he is. Because he doesn't have an answer for the second question. Elias was quiet. Then, you're observant. I'm a bookseller. We watch people. He looked out the window. What do you observe about me? She should have said something safe. Professional. She wasn't sure why she didn't. That you're lonelier than you intended to be, she said. And that it surprises you. The silence that followed was different from before. He didn't answer. He looked out the window for the rest of the drive. When the car stopped at her apartment and she stepped out, she turned back to say goodnight. He was already looking at her. Good night, Maya, he said. Not Miss Callahan. First name. She noticed. She went upstairs and couldn't sleep for an hour. On day 17, she arrived at his house for a briefing on the upcoming family gathering, a weekend event in the countryside that would require them to stay 2 nights. She was reviewing the guest list in the study when she heard raised voices from the hallway. 2 men. One was Elias. The other she didn't recognize. She shouldn't have listened. She tried not to. But she heard enough. You can't keep running from it, Elias. The Koval situation doesn't disappear because you ignore it. I'm not ignoring it. Then deal with it. Before it deals with you. He's already been asking questions about the acquisition. About where the money came from. If he gets to your new, a pause, companion before you've protected her. She has nothing to do with this. She's in your world now. That means she has everything to do with it. A door closed hard. Maya sat very still at the desk. Her tea had gone cold. Elias returned to the study 2 minutes later. His jaw was tight. He sat down, picked up the guest list, as if nothing had happened. Who is Koval? She asked. He looked up slowly. She met his gaze steadily. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. The walls aren't as thick as you think. A long moment passed. Something crossed his face, not anger. Something more complicated. Respect, maybe. And something else. Worry. He's a problem I'm managing, Elias said. Does this problem involve me now? He held her gaze. I'll make sure it doesn't. She should have been more afraid. She knew that. But what she felt, sitting across from him in that quiet study, was something closer to trust, which was, arguably, more dangerous. The country gathering happened the following weekend. It was at a property she could only describe as old-world significant, a manor house outside the city, set on several hundred acres, with an actual staff of groundskeepers and housekeepers who had clearly worked there for decades. The kind of place that doesn't get bought. It gets inherited. There were 11 family members present. Brothers, sisters-in-law, an aunt who never stopped smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes, 2 cousins who looked at Maya like she was a puzzle they were already bored by, and, at the head of the table, Elias's grandmother, Agatha Voss, 81 years old, straight-backed, silver hair, wore a single strand of pearls and looked at everything like she was deciding whether it deserved to continue existing. This, Maya would later understand, was the real reason she'd been hired. Not the corporate dinners. Not the charity gala coming up. This. Agatha Voss was dying. Her heart. Slowly but certainly. And in her remaining time, her singular focus had become one thing, getting Elias settled before she went. She had tried, in her grandmother's commanding, unsubtle way, to introduce him to appropriate matches for 3 years. He had rebuffed all of them. So he had produced Maya. Not a real relationship, but a demonstration. A living, breathing answer to the question Agatha wouldn't stop asking. Maya understood this by the second hour of the visit, when Agatha took her aside, just the 2 of them, in a sitting room that smelled of old roses, and looked at her with those sharp gray eyes. Where Elias got his, she saw now, and said, My grandson doesn't let people in. I know, Maya said carefully. He hasn't let anyone in since he lost someone important. Years ago. He locked the door and threw away the key. Agatha watched her. So I want to know something. Girl to girl, forget the performance. Maya waited. Do you actually see him? Or is this what it looks like, a transaction? The room was very quiet. And Maya, to her own surprise, felt something tighten in her chest. because the honest answer was already getting complicated. I see him, she said quietly. I don't know what to do with that yet. Agatha studied her for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. Good, she said. That's the right answer. And the only honest one I've heard from anyone he's brought to this house in years. That evening, Maya found herself next to Elias on the terrace after dinner. The others had drifted inside. The night was cool, the sky was vast, and for a few minutes, they just stood there looking at it. What did my grandmother say to you? He asked. That you locked a door a long time ago. He was quiet. Who did you lose? She asked. He exhaled slowly, looked at the sky. Her name was Claire. We were together for 3 years. She died in an accident. 5 years ago. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. He said it without bitterness. Just tiredness. It doesn't change the shape of it. No, she agreed. It doesn't. He looked at her sideways. Your mother? 18 months ago. Cancer. They stood in the shared quiet of two people who had been reshaped by loss and had learned to carry it. Not identically, but in a way that recognized something in the other. You didn't tell me that, he said. You didn't ask. He nodded. Slowly. I should have asked. That was all. But it was a great deal more than nothing. Maya stood on that terrace in the dark, feeling the air change between them, and thought, this is where it gets complicated. She wasn't wrong. By the time they reached the charity gala, week 5 of 12, Maya had begun to understand the full scope of what Elias Voss was. It wasn't just the money, though the money was staggering. His family had built the foundation of their wealth in private equity 3 generations back. Elias had expanded it, diversified. He sat on the boards of 4 companies, owned controlling interest in 2 others, and had made a habit of acquiring struggling businesses, stabilizing them, and either keeping them or selling them at a quiet profit. He was also, in certain circles, known for something else. Not illegal. Not exactly. But Elias Voss had a reputation for playing hardball with people who crossed him. Not violently, he was nothing so simple as a thug. But methodically. Completely. When someone wronged him or the people in his world, they found that things got very difficult for them. Contracts fell through. Investors pulled back. Doors closed. He didn't threaten. He just made the landscape change. People in his world were careful around him. Not from fear, exactly. From the particular respect that comes from watching someone win without appearing to try. Maya had been careful not to be impressed. She had been mostly unsuccessful. By week 6, she had a key. Not to his house, to the study. She spent 2 evenings a week there now, not for events, but for what had quietly become their routine. She came after the bookstore closed. He was always working. She brought tea. She had started making it herself in his kitchen, finding her way around with the permission of the housekeeper, and they sat in that room with the books and the unlit fireplace and talked. Or didn't talk. Both were fine. She read. He worked. And somehow this was more intimate than any of the dinners. One evening, she mentioned that the store's roof was leaking. A minor thing. She didn't say it as a complaint, just a detail. The next morning, a contractor arrived at the bookstore. Sent by Mr. Voss. Roof repaired by afternoon. No invoice. She texted him. You didn't have to do that. It wasn't part of the contract. He replied, the contract doesn't cover everything. She stared at that message a long time before putting her phone down. Mr. Fortis came in the following Tuesday and said, you look less tired, girl. And she laughed, actually laughed, which surprised them both. Diane called one evening and said, carefully, Maya, you're different. What's going on? Nothing, she said. Everything is the same. You're lying. She was, but she couldn't explain it. How could she explain that she'd begun to look forward to certain hours of her week the way she used to look forward to summer as a child? Simple, unreasonable, and entirely involuntary. There was the evening he walked into the study carrying a first edition of her favorite novel, a worn copy, clearly beloved by someone before, and set it on her chair without a word. No bow. No explanation. Just placed it there and went back to his desk. She picked it up, looked at him. It came through an auction last week, he said without looking up. I know you own a copy already. This one's better. She held the book carefully. Something in her chest was doing something she didn't fully authorize. Elias. He looked up. She wanted to say something about the fact that he paid attention to things he wasn't supposed to be paying attention to, that she had mentioned this book once, in passing, 2 weeks ago, that he had remembered, that it mattered. Instead, she said, "Thank you." He held her gaze a beat. "You're welcome." And that was it. Back to work. Back to books. But she was warm for the rest of the evening in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. The family gathering had a follow-up, a second visit to the manor 2 weeks later, just the two of them, to check on Agatha's health. The old woman was declining more quickly than anyone had said aloud. Elias was quiet the entire drive. Maya didn't fill the silence. She had learned that he didn't want it filled.
He wanted company.
Not noise. When they arrived, Agatha was in bed. But her eyes were bright, and when Maya sat beside her, she took her hand, just took it, without asking, and held it. "You're good for him," Agatha said. "I can see it." Maya didn't correct her. She couldn't find the words. After, in the hallway, she found Elias leaning against the wall, with his eyes closed. Just for a moment. Just breathing. She stopped beside him. He opened his eyes, looked at her, and the usual controlled surface of him was thin, thinner than she had seen. There was something under it that was just a man who loved his grandmother and was losing her and didn't know what to do with that. She did the only thing that made sense. She took his hand, like Agatha had taken hers. He looked down at their hands, then at her. He didn't pull away. They stood there like that for a long moment in the quiet hallway of the old house. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. There was just the fact of two people holding on. When they finally separated, he looked away first, but he didn't let go until she did. That night, in the car home, they didn't speak. But somewhere on the dark road between the manor and the city, he reached over and turned her hand palm up on the seat between them. Just rested his fingers over hers.
Light.
Not holding, just touching. She turned her hand to meet his. Neither of them said a word. Neither of them had to. It happened on a Thursday. Week 8. She was in the study when the door opened without a knock. Not the housekeeper, not Elias. A man she didn't know. Late 50s. Expensive coat. The kind of face that wore pleasantness like a mask. You could see the shape of the mask, but not what was under it. "Miss Callahan," he said. What a surprise. She stood. "Who are you?" "I'm a colleague of Elias's." He walked in slowly, looking at the bookshelves. "I was hoping to run into you, actually." Something cold moved through her. She remembered what she'd overheard weeks ago. The name she hadn't forgotten. "Are you Koval?" she asked. He looked at her.
Paused.
And then smiled in a way that confirmed it. "Smart girl," he said. He chose well. "What do you want?" He sat down uninvited, in the chair across from her. "Do you know what Elias was doing 3 years ago? Before you, before the gala circuit, before all the elegance." He gestured around. "He was involved in an acquisition deal that I arranged. A media company. Very lucrative. Elias was my partner." "Was," she said. "Was." He smiled again. He had a change of conscience. Pulled out at the last moment. The deal fell through. I lost a great deal of money. And then, mysteriously, several of my business contacts became very difficult to reach. Opportunities closed. His voice remained pleasant. "You know how that goes." She said nothing. "I have information," he said. "Documents. About money that moved in ways that would be embarrassing for Elias. Perhaps legally concerning." He tilted his head. "I don't want to use them. I simply want a conversation with him. But he won't take my meetings. I thought perhaps you might encourage him to reconsider." The room felt very still. "You want me to be your pressure point," she said flatly. "I want you to be a bridge." She stared at him. "Get out of this house." He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You heard me." Her voice was steady. She was surprised by how steady. "Get out. And if you ever come into a room I'm sitting in without an invitation again, you will not find me helpful in any way whatsoever." He studied her for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Reassessment. "Interesting," he murmured.
He stood.
smoothed his coat. He really did choose well. He walked to the door.
Paused.
Think about it, Miss Callahan. What you do with this information will affect more than just the contract. It might affect whether you have a bookstore to go back to. He left. She sat very still for 30 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called Elias. He arrived at the house in 11 minutes. She told him everything. Every word. She watched his jaw tighten, his eyes go hard and still, that particular stillness that was his version of anger. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "You could have."
What?
"Used it." She looked at him. "To do what?" "He didn't offer me anything I wanted." He was watching her. "You weren't afraid of him." "I was a little." She was honest, but not enough to do what he wanted. Most people would have been. "I'm not most people." She paused. "Which you apparently knew when you hired me." Something moved across his face. Something he was trying to contain. He looked away, toward the window. Outside, finally, the fountain was running. She'd noticed it earlier that week. He'd turned it on. "Maya." His voice was quieter. "I need to tell you something." She waited. He turned back, looked at her directly. "The documents he mentioned, they're real. There was a period early in my career when I made decisions I wouldn't make now. I got out when I understood what the deal was really structured around. But there is a paper trail. I've known for months he was sitting on it." She absorbed this. "So you've been managing a threat?" "Yes." "Was I part of managing it? Was I a strategy?" A long pause. She felt something cold at the edge of her chest, waiting. "No," he said. And then, less certainly, "You were supposed to be. You were meant to be a stabilizer. A public show of normalcy. That was the plan. And now." He looked at her for a long time. "Now you're the most honest thing in my life," he said quietly. "And I don't know what to do with that." The cold thing at the edge of her chest went somewhere else. Somewhere different. She thought of the book he had placed on her chair. The contractor who had fixed her roof. The hand in the dark car on the road back from the manor. The fountain is running again. She thought of what Agatha had said. "Do you actually see him?" "You need to deal with Koval," she said. "Not for me. For yourself. You know that." "I know. And the documents. Whatever's in them, face it. You're not the same person you were then. But it catches up with you faster if you run." He was watching her with that expression she'd learned, the one where he was listening harder than he appeared. "Is that the bookseller talking?" he said. "Or the woman who knows about running from things?" She thought of the store, the back room, the hour of light through the window.
Both, she said.
What followed were 10 days that Maya would remember for the rest of her life. Elias moved against Koval. Not violently, not messily, but decisively, and with the methodical precision she had come to understand was his particular gift.
He brought his lawyers in.
He disclosed the relevant documents himself, proactively, to the appropriate regulatory body, before Koval could use them as leverage. He took the consequence, a significant fine, an internal audit, and a 3-month suspension from one of his board seats. It was uncomfortable and expensive and very public in certain circles. But it defanged Koval completely. You can't threaten someone with information they've already disclosed. Koval tried to escalate. He put pressure on 2 of Elias's business associates. He reached out to a journalist. He sent a message through an intermediary to Maya, directly to the bookstore, a written note, suggesting that she reconsider who she was protecting. Maya handed the note to Elias's lawyer and went back to arranging the new arrival of poetry collections. Mr. Fortis came in the next day and found her singing very quietly to herself behind the counter. He put his new mystery novel down and looked at her suspiciously. "What happened to you?" "Nothing," she said. He squinted. "It's a man." "Goodbye, Mr. Fortis." "It's definitely a man," he said, picking up the novel. Agatha Voss died on a Sunday morning, peacefully, in the manor house with the window open and the garden in view. Elias called Maya, not his assistant, not a family member, her. She got in a cab without thinking. When she arrived at the manor, she found him on the terrace, the same one where they had stood on that first visit, looking at the night sky. He was alone. Everyone else was inside, doing the necessary things. She walked to him and stood beside him, the way she had learned he needed, close but not crowding, present but not demanding. She knew, he said eventually, about the arrangement. She figured it out within the first visit. I know, Maya said. She asked me directly. He looked at her. What did you say? That I saw you. And I didn't know what to do with that. He turned to face her fully. The morning light was cold and clear. That was 6 weeks ago. Yes. What do you know what to do with it now? She looked at him for a long moment. The man who had put an envelope on her kitchen table in the dark, who had chosen her for reasons that were supposed to be clinical and turned out to be anything but, who had turned his fountain back on, who had held her hand in the hallway of his grandmother's house. Yes, she said. I do. He crossed the space between them, slowly, giving her time to stop him. She didn't stop him. He put his hands on either side of her face, the way she had never expected from someone so controlled, so careful, so deliberately closed, and he held her like she was something real, something he was afraid to break, something he had decided was worth being afraid of. He kissed her, gentle at first, then not gentle, the kind of kiss that carried everything unsaid from 10 weeks of careful restraint. She felt it in her collarbone, in the backs of her hands, in all the tired places she had been carrying alone for 1.5 years since her mother died. When they pulled back, he was looking at her with those gray eyes, and they were not still anymore. They were full of something. Everything. I know this started as a contract, he said. It did, she agreed. The contract ends in 2 weeks. I know. I don't want it to end. She felt something settle in her, deep and quiet and permanent, like a book finding its shelf. Then we write a different one, she said. He pulled her back in. And for a long time, on the terrace of the old house where his grandmother had just died, and the garden was full of autumn light, they held each other. Just held on. The fountain in the courtyard below was running. The following 2 weeks were not easy ones. Agatha's funeral brought the full weight of the Voss family together, and with it, the full weight of their opinions, their questions, and their scrutiny. There were cousins who narrowed their eyes at Maya. There was an aunt who asked, very pointedly, about her family background. There was an older brother who cornered Elias at the reception and spoke for 10 minutes in a low voice about timing and propriety. Elias listened politely, thanked him, and then went back across the room to Maya. Took her hand in front of everyone. Not a statement. Not a performance. Just a choice. The aunt with the smile that didn't reach her eyes watched this, and made a small sound. Maya looked at her steadily. The aunt looked away first. Koval, meanwhile, had gone quiet. His lawyer had sent a settlement proposal. Elias's lawyers were handling it. The paper trail had been addressed. There would be no further threat, not of the professional kind, not of the personal kind. Elias had stood in the open and taken his consequence, and what was left was solid. Maya stood at the funeral, in the black dress she had bought herself this time, and felt the strange dual awareness of grief and something new growing in its shade. Loss and beginning running alongside each other. She understood that better than most. She thought about her mother.
About the store.
About the back room with the biographies where she had cried, and the hour of light through the front window, and Mr. Fordyce with his mystery novels and his grumpy perception. She was not the woman she had been when the envelope appeared on her kitchen table. She was not hollowed out anymore. The contract officially ended on a Wednesday. Elias came to the bookstore. First time he had ever come there. He arrived in the afternoon, the good hour, as it happened, when the light came through at just the right angle and made the whole small space look like something you'd see in a painting. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at the shelves, the handwritten shelf labels, the small display Maya had built near the window from local poetry collections. It's smaller than I imagined, he said. Most real things are, she said from behind the counter. He walked in slowly, ran a finger along a row of spines, picked one up, set it back. The debts are cleared, he said, as agreed. I know. Thank you.
He turned,
looked at her across the store. The contract is done. Yes. So everything that comes next is ours, she said. He crossed the store in about 4 steps. Maya hired part-time help for the bookstore, a college student named Remy who was blessedly enthusiastic about hand-selling books and who thought Mr. Fortis was the funniest person alive. The store didn't become an overnight success, but it breathed again.
It had space to try.
She moved some of her books to the study at the house. Not all of them, just the ones she reread often. The first edition he had given her went on the shelf right next to his desk. He didn't say anything about it. She noticed that he noticed. Elias attended his board reinstatement without drama, handled the last of the Koval situation through the lawyers, and began, very quietly, to take long weekends. This was unprecedented in his history for the housekeeper, who told Maya this with undisguised relief. They drove back to the manor once, just the two of them, walked the garden, stood at the window of the room where Agatha had died. Elias was quiet in the way he sometimes was, not shut, just thoughtful. She would have liked this version, Maya said. Which version?
You.
Now. She glanced at him, less locked. He was quiet for a moment. She liked you before I did. Maya tilted her head. Is that a complaint?
No.
He looked at her. She had better instincts. Grandmothers usually do.
He took her hand.
Looked out the window at the garden his grandmother had kept for 40 years. Something in his face was soft in a way that used to not be possible. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For calling back. He turned to look at her. After the card. You almost didn't. I know you almost didn't. She thought about that morning in her kitchen. The cold tile. The cooling coffee. Her name in dark ink. I almost didn't, she agreed. What made you? She thought about it honestly. I was tired of being careful and still ending up afraid. I figured if I was going to be afraid anyway, I might as well be afraid of something new. He looked at her for a long time. That look she knew now, the one where he was listening harder than he appeared, where something behind the gray eyes was adding up everything she said and keeping it safely. I'm glad you were tired, he said. She smiled. Small and real and entirely hers. So am I. The fountain in the courtyard was running when they left. It always ran now. And that is where the story settles. Not in a perfect ending. Those belong to fairy tales, and she was a woman who loved books too much to pretend. But in something better than perfect. Something real, a woman who had been holding on with both hands, alone, in a small store full of other people's stories, finally in the middle of her own. A man who had built walls strong enough to withstand everything except one person who didn't try to climb them, who just stood on the other side and waited until he remembered how to open the door. The bookstore survived, not because of money in the end, though the money helped, but because Maya finally stopped running it like something she was losing and started running it like something she was building. Elias went to one of his board meetings and came home early. First time anyone could remember. He walked into the study where Maya was sitting in the good chair with a cup of tea and a book, and he sat down across from her with his own book, and they stayed there in the quiet of a room that was full of light and warmth and the soft company of two people who had found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. Outside, the fountain ran. Inside, the fireplace burned. And it was enough. It was more than enough. And that's the story of Maya Callahan. The woman who almost didn't call back, who picked up an offer from a stranger and discovered, somewhere in the fine print of all those careful months, that what she'd really been offered was a second chance. At the store. At herself. At love. The complicated, inconvenient, entirely worth it kind. If this story reached something in you today, if you felt something in Maya's tiredness, or Elias's loneliness, or that moment when she stood on a terrace at night and realized things had gotten complicated, then this story did exactly what it was supposed to do. Thank you for spending this time here. Truly. If you'd like more stories like this, complete, emotional, cinematic stories you can lose yourself in for an hour, subscribe, and we'll bring you one every week. New story coming